And welcome back to Touchline Talk here on 110 Sports. It's time to introduce what I like to call the reality meter. So we're going to take Europe's top 5 leagues, two statements, things that are currently true, observations about the table, whatever it might be, and then I'm going to give a number 1 through 10, how realistic I think that is, or how accurate that's going to look by the end of the season. 1 being we're living in a completely alternate reality, 10 being this is complete reality, nothing's going to change. We're going to start in France with Ligue 1. Our first thing here is very simply that PSG is leading by 5 points. This is a 10. PSG is going to win this league. They're going to win this league comfortably. I've said that before. It's not surprising. It's not bold in any way, shape, or form. The fact that they've already built this lead and lost their first 2 games of the season tells you just how much better they are than everybody else. Once they got healthy, once they got through suspensions and just the chaos that was those first couple weeks, they've had no problem whatsoever. They're beating teams left and right. They're going to win incredibly comfortably. And some of the teams that you looked at to really be their competitors, Marseille, Lyon, etc., have not gotten off to the greatest starts. So you're talking about Lille and Rennes up there, which leads to point 2 here, which is Lille and Rennes holding those other Champions League spots in the top 3 right now. I'm going with a 5. That it's not a fluke. That would be unfair to what they've done so far, particularly Lille, who, again, I hammered for continuing to draw instead of win, but you look at what they did to AC Milan in the Europa League, they are good. They have some good players. It's a really intriguing roster, actually, I feel like. They got some underappreciated guys. I like what I've seen from them. I think they are a top 30 or so team in the world, which equates to quite possibly a top 3 team in France. My hesitation, though, and why I went with the 5 is that the teams right behind these two are Marseille, Lyon, and Monaco. I am starting to believe in Marseille again. I feel like they might take this spot from Rennes. If I had to predict right now, I would say Lille holds on to one of these spots and Marseille gets the other one. Rennes is struggling on all fronts right now. I brought this question up before of can they continue to perform in League once the Champions League rolls around, and can they continue to do it without some of these key pieces that they've lost? It's just the reality when you have a season like they did last year, and then also because of the pandemic you can't really reap the rewards financially of qualifying for the Champions League. Your Chelsea's and Leeds United are going to start coming after your players. So you got to find a way to rebuild that, to get new guys in, and it just hasn't quite worked. They've been good. They're a good team, but they're no match for this group in the Champions League as you've seen so far. I don't think they are really I think they're probably the 4th or 5th best team in France. And they caught some breaks last year with everybody else having a down year and not having to worry about European competition. That really matters to me. So I went with the 5. It's not necessarily a fake reality world we're living in, but I also don't think it tells the entire story of what's going to end up happening when we get to the end of the season. Next we go to the Bundesliga. Bayern ahead by 2 points. I went with a 9, only because they haven't been quite as convincing as PSG, and ultimately Leipzig and Dortmund are still within 1 game here. They just haven't built the same lead. They haven't been destroying people the way PSG are. They also didn't lose their first 2 games and then really round into form. And it's also just a tougher league. There's going to be some bumps along the way. But I again submit the fact that these couple close title races we've had these past handful of seasons came because Dortmund was able to get ahead and put pressure on Bayern. Bayern still ultimately got the job done, but there was at least this question of, oh, they're 3 points back, 4 points back, 6 points back, 8 points back, whatever it might be. Can they keep it up? Can Dortmund continue to win games and not let that gap close? Ultimately, they couldn't do it. But this is a different world. Unless Bayern slips up coming out of this international break, they're probably going to be ahead at Christmas. And they're probably going to be ahead from this point moving forward. I'm not convinced that anybody can catch them and make up ground. Your only hope is to get out ahead and then keep performing and just not allow Bayern to catch you. And that's not the world we're living in. By losing their Klassiker, Dortmund sacrificed that. And I just don't think Leipzig have the firepower to sustain it for the entire season. They're obviously one of the top 3 teams in the league. They can beat Bayern on any given day, which is really what Dortmund have to hope for, is that Leipzig does them a huge favor and somehow takes a bunch of points off Bayern. But to me, this is still a 2-horse race at the end of the day, and I don't think it's going to be a real tense situation for Bayern by the end. The other thing here I wanted to mention that we're going to talk about is some interesting teams in the top 6, because your top 3 is very clear. But 4, 5, 6, Leverkusen, Union Berlin, Wolfsburg. I went with the 6 that this is on the reality meter here. Wolfsburg are still unbeaten. It's been a bunch of draws, which I submit what I was talking about with Leo a couple shows back. But they've been good defensively. Ultimately, they're picking up points. And Union Berlin have a +9 goal differential. What they've done so far is not fluky. I just don't think they can keep it up. And any top 6 that is without Borussia Mönchengladbach, to me, is going to be wrong. So there's some truth to what's happening here. I am sold on this run of form that Leverkusen are in. I still will slightly give the edge to Mönchengladbach. So to me, that's your top 5, and I would put Wolfsburg 6. So it's not all that far off from what we've seen so far, but I couldn't give this any higher than a 6 because it doesn't include Gladbach, and I'm really high on what they're doing. I think what you saw last season is basically what you're going to see again at the top of the Bundesliga table. Maybe almost exactly. It's going to be pretty close. Then we jump to La Liga, where we have some interesting things here because Real Sociedad, Villarreal, Atletico Madrid are your top 3. We all had that one coming, right? I went with a 4. I firmly believe Real Sociedad are for real. I talked about this from the beginning of the season that I liked this team. I thought they can make some noise, but they're not winning this league. They're not. I'll stand up here and admit I'm wrong if they find a way to keep this up. I just don't see any world in which they continue to perform this way, and they've had a fairly favorable schedule so far. I need to see them step up and beat the best teams in this league for me to declare them title favorites or within their title contenders because they're winning the league right now. But look at how long Everton's title contention lasted. I thought they would be there to the end in the top 4 conversation, and they're on the verge of dropping out of that already. It can change really quickly if something goes wrong. But I think that they are very good. They are much better than they were last season. And then the other part of this is Atletico Madrid. To me, right now, they're the best team in this league. Again, the points per game tells a little bit different story, so you got to keep that in mind because they haven't played as many games. This league is theirs to lose. It's a long way from them actually being the ones that come out on top. But the way things have gone so far, the way João Felix is playing, this is theirs to lose. So that part of this is absolutely legit to me. And then Villarreal is the other part of this that made me drop it down to a 4. Again, it's not absurd. There is truth to what is happening, but I just don't see this looking very similar at the end of the year. I could potentially see Sociedad in the top 3. Athletic will absolutely be in the top 3 as they are every season. Or at least most of the time. It's going to be at least a three-way title race. But I'm not to the point where I'm ruling out Barcelona and Real Madrid. Speaking of those two, part of the reason the table looks like this is that they have only won 53% of their games so far this season. I went with the 5 here because last season that number was 67. And that was not a great Real Madrid team and not a great Barcelona team. So if you split it down the middle, that's 60%. That's the number I think they're going to get to. It's not going to be as bad as it's been, but it's also not going to... They're not the same teams they were last season. La Liga is just not what it used to be. I don't think they're going to all of a sudden pull this together and run away from everybody else. I think it's going to be a dogfight, and they still need to show me that they can perform as consistently as Atletico Madrid have. But I do think it's going to improve. And that now that they're starting to see that the performances they've been putting in aren't good enough, I think this is going to change a little bit. So ultimately, I still have the same top 3 because I think 60% is going to be enough. The only team I could see changing that potentially, like I said, is Sociedad. But I need to see him do this for another 2 months. I need to see what they look like against Atleti, against Real, against Barca, for me to believe they're going to actually finish in the top 3. Wrong one, sorry. We're going to Serie A next. There we go. So, of course, we got AC Milan at the top of the table. They're ahead by 2 points. I'm going with a 4. They've had a loss and a draw in their last 2 games. Like I said, Lille handled them in the Europa League. And then not a great draw in their last Serie A game either. I just am still somewhat skeptical. That unbeaten run was so impressive, and they beat some good teams along the way. But they haven't played the same difficulty of schedule that some of these other big clubs have so far in Serie A. And I want to see how they respond to this poor run of form. Because it's easy to keep this up when you're playing out of your mind like they have been. I think they're good, capable of finishing in a Champions League spot, but I need to see a little bit more, and I would lean more toward a 5 than a 4. I just haven't changed my mind about the top of this league yet. The other thing here is that Juventus, Atalanta, Inter Milan all outside the top 4 right now. Which is rather hard to comprehend, but that's the world we live in. And I went with a 5 out of 10. I like what I've seen from Roma. I think Roma's going to have something to say about those Champions League spots. And I've been quite frankly disappointed by all 3 of these teams so far. Juventus, without Ronaldo, was drawing against teams they have no business drawing against. Atalanta is not scoring at the same rate they were last season, and that's a major problem because they're still giving up goals. Their goal differential is +4 right now. What convinced me at the beginning of this season that they were going to be maybe even better than they were last year was their goal difference. They dominated this league and just somehow didn't find a way to win it. They haven't been the same team. They're not scoring at the same rate, and they're still giving up goals, which is going to happen. I think they can survive that way. But it means you got to be scoring 2, 3, 4, 5 goals a game, and they're just not doing it. And then Inter, I picked to win this league. there's still part of me that thinks they're going to, but it's becoming harder to ignore some of the poor performances they've had. It just hasn't clicked. They missed Lukaku for a little bit. They had a big win against Atalanta in their hands, and then Atalanta just took control at the end of that game. Ultimately ended in a draw. So to me, this is as much about all these teams underperforming as it is AC Milan overperforming. I think they're just kind of being consistent, taking advantage of everybody else playing poorly. So I went with a 5 because I don't think all 3 of them are going to finish in the top 4. Or at least there's a likely... I could absolutely see a world in which only 2 of them get in. And they just are not as good as I expected them to be. Particularly Inter Milan. But at the same time, this is just going to be a rough league this year because there are so many good teams and nobody's really found a way to be consistent outside of AC Milan. But I don't think Sassuolo keeps this up, so there's 3 spots available. I could just very easily see a world in which at least one of these teams is outside the top 4. And then we go to the Premier League, where Leicester are ahead by a point. I gave this a 3. They are a top 4 caliber team. That is absolutely true. I've been harping on this from the beginning. They have not been healthy. When they are healthy, they're going to look like the team that was second in the Premier League for most of last season. They have done this for too long outside of that collapse at the end of last season to suggest otherwise. However, that collapse happened. It fits into sort of the past history of Brendan Rodgers, and it's just way too early to actually think they can keep this up. The only thing they have going in their favor is that this looks like the closest thing to 15-16 since 15-16. There is no dominant team. The only difference is that Liverpool is still there, and Liverpool is obviously right behind them. But the other thing here that I will continue to stick to, and why I said top 4 caliber team, because last year I was very much, they are a top 4 team, is I believe in Liverpool. They got more bad injury news with Joe Gomez. They're clearly nowhere near the same team they were last year just because they're so beat up. But I'm not ruling them out. I refuse to do so with their resilience, and hopefully Alexander-Arnold doesn't miss much time either. It could be a rough go for a couple months, but they've given themselves a cushion that they can stay within striking distance even if they struggle. I've been on the Spurs hype train since the beginning of the season, and it hasn't even really clicked into top gear yet. I think they're going to be there to the very end. And then also, people are talking about Spurs. People are talking about Liverpool. People are talking about Leicester. Why is nobody talking about Chelsea? Since Edouard Mendy came in and fixed the goalkeeping position, they have been sensational. There was all this hype surrounding them at the beginning of the season, and then they struggled some defensively. Kepa kept making mistakes, and all of a sudden everybody kind of cooled on Lampard and wrote them off. They are right there, and I think they're going to be right in the thick of the title race. I'm almost leaning to give them the title favorites accolade right now. I don't think I'm quite there, but I think I'm very high on that Chelsea team as well. To me, they need to be in the exact same discussion as Liverpool and Spurs. And then you got Manchester City, who I still also do not believe is going to fall apart. That's 4 teams right there. So, Leicester is that good. I just don't know if they're as good as these other teams. That was the huge problem for me this season. Even with United being way worse than I thought they would be. There just aren't that many spots in the top 4 when City, Liverpool, Chelsea are spending like that, and when Spurs are playing like this, and also the money that they spent. So then finally, the other part of this. Right now, Manchester City, Arsenal, and Manchester United are all 10th or lower. I gave this a 2. I think all three of them are going to finish in the top 10. I think City still got a very good shot to finish in the top 4. Again, it's a little bit distorted because of the difference in games played. I'm not willing to panic on Manchester City yet. They're not going to be the same dominant team they were 2 and 3 years ago. They're going to look more like last year, but that might be enough because of Liverpool's injuries and the way this league is going. Arsenal, as I've mentioned before, had a really, really tough schedule. So I'm not going to overreact to the Aston Villa game. That defense has been much improved. I still think they're heading the right direction. It'll all even itself out in the end. And United, I could see finishing 10th. Because you got Wolves in there, because you got Everton. They could also finish 8th. It's possible they sneak into the top 4. I'm not going to... I'll believe it when I see it, though. This is not the same league that they ran through at the end of last season to sneak in. The talent at the top of this... The depth at the top of this league is way stronger. Even if you don't have that clear dominant team like Liverpool was last season. So those are our reality meter grades. It's just sort of crazy to think about the fact that we got PSG and Bayern up at the top as expected, but then you're looking at Real Sociedad in La Liga, Leicester in the Premier League, Sassuolo right up there at the top of Serie A with AC Milan. Again, it's very, very early, but we're 2 international breaks in. It's hard to just dismiss this stuff out of hand and not put any stock into it either. So that's where we are. We're going to take our second break. When we come back, real quickly, a look at what's next, talking about these Euro playoffs that are taking place this afternoon and upcoming Nations League action during this international break. You are watching Touchline Talk. Don't go anywhere.